Hey, would you like to learn how to get rid of pain in your body naturally without surgery? This could be lower back pain or pain in other areas, or even emotional pain that is being stored in your tissues. I bring on an expert in neurokinetic therapy who explains how he helps people diagnose their compensation patterns in their muscles and body to get rid of the pain through neurokinetic therapy. And he also explains how he helps people release old emotional patterns and generational wounds that are stuck in the body. Really cool interview. Make sure to check it out. If you're looking to get thicker, fuller, and stronger hair, make sure to check out fullyvital.com. The team has spent years putting together a 100% natural set of products that stimulate hair follicles in 4 different ways to achieve maximum hair growth and hair wellness. So if you're interested in getting thicker, fuller, and stronger hair, make sure to check out fullyvital.com. If you're enjoying the episodes on this channel, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below so you can get notified when we release new episodes. Our goal on this show is to help you look and feel younger and live your best life. So make sure to subscribe down below. With that said, let's get on with the interview. Hello and welcome back to the Anti-Aging Hacks podcast. Today, my guest is Charles Clay, who's an inner peace coach and healer. He's also a neurokinetic pain relief specialist. After earning his kinesiology degree from Washington State University, Charles experienced a devastating back injury while snowboarding. Despite his doctor's orders to undergo spinal surgery, he chose to follow his intuition and began his journey to self-healing through neurokinetic therapy. He's the founder of Freedom from Pain and the Inner Peace Process. Charles offers the step-by-step inner peace process for releasing internal blocks, unprocessed emotions, and negative subconscious beliefs that keep people stuck. This guided process helps with healing deep-rooted generational wounds so they don't have to be passed down to our children. With that said, Charles, welcome to the Anti-Aging Hacks podcast.
Thank you, brother. Very happy to be here. Excited to drop in.
Absolutely. I'm excited to have you. And I know your backstory, Charles, but I think it's quite a fascinating one. So for the listeners, please explain your backstory and how you got into what you do now with health and wellness.
Sure. Yeah. I've always had this fascination with the greatest technology on the planet. And it is not these computers, it's not these smartphones that captivate so much of our attention. It's actually these human bodies, these sensory suits that we get to call home for such a short time. So my background is in kinesiology, my degree from Washington State, minor in health and wellness, and then became a trainer shortly after in San Diego, moved to enjoy the beach life. And it was in 2008 that I found myself on Mammoth Mountain with 2 of my buddies. And it was crazy conditions. There was literally snow coming every which way. It was a full-on blizzard. And we had already made it to the top and they closed down the lifts because it was so dangerous. And we're kind of looking at each other like, man, this is pretty extreme, but there's only one way down. Let's charge and have a blast. You know, you could barely see, like 10 feet in front of you,
Wow.
like a blur of a tree. And so we were just charging this mountain, having a blast, just, snowboarding through this white abyss. And about halfway down, all of a sudden I went off a jump that I didn't know was there. And so I found myself in midair. It felt like I just went off a cliff. And I freaked out. I went into, tight mode. And as soon as I landed, it was like this impact on my low back, on my spine. It felt like I just got hit by a lightning bolt in the low back. And man, it was so painful. It was the most physical pain I'd experienced to date. And I remember yelling to my friends, hoping that they could hear me. And yet they were in front of me and already gone down, couldn't hear through the blur of the snow. And I remember looking at my phone and seeing that it was dead. And so here I am all by myself in the middle of this mountain in a full-on blizzard at like a level 11 on a pain scale of 10. And, it's in those moments that we just find another gear, and was able to like channel my inner Spartan warrior and do whatever I could to get down the mountain. I literally had to click my board off and sit on my board and slide down little by little and like keel over, breathe into the pain for a while. And eventually I made it down the mountain. And then I had to go see doctors, right, to see how bad the damage was. And I did not like the bad news they gave me. I saw multiple doctors because they were showing me MRIs, x-rays of how jacked up my spine was. And they were telling me the same thing. They were saying that I would need surgery, maybe multiple surgeries, or I'd never move the same again. So for
Wow.
someone that like really is grateful for the, the human body, this was like the worst news I could have gotten. And even in a state of fight or flight, I was able to access my intuition and decide that that wasn't my path. There's another way. I'm going to try everything naturally to heal this on my own instead of going under the knife. And I'm so glad I made that choice because it wasn't easy by any means. I remember being in my apartment in San Diego, I could barely crawl to the bathroom. I was in so much pain. And just like the wrong move would be like, that lightning bolt and sharp pain. And I remember finally just fully surrendering to all these heavy emotions that I had been running from, avoiding, trying not to feel, or just resorting to pleasure instead of pain that had essentially caught up to me. And, it was like my life at that time was like training 10 clients a day, going full bore, living off coffee, and then on the weekends going out and just partying and having a blast. Right. So that was Charles 1.0. And there was a lot I was masking. It was like Captain Positivity, but there were some unaddressed, trapped emotions. And I finally got to sit with that. It was like all this was happening for me. And as soon as I declared that, was like, instead of being in this victim mode, like, why is this happening to me? I was like, okay, how is this happening for me? And what are the lessons and blessings to learn in this? And what in my life needs to change? Those are 3 self-inquiry questions that were really key to my healing naturally. And I remember after the tears fell and I went into the depths of some of these heavier emotions, like shame, because I couldn't even walk straight. I looked like a wreck, let alone do something productive, get to work. Fear, if I was ever going to move the same again, having to face that. Some grief that was unprocessed from some loss earlier on. And as I released that and moved through those emotions, I just gained this huge level of clarity. And it allowed me to set the intention in my heart for healing naturally by any means necessary. And I set that intention as I did a meditation. And in that meditation, I hadn't heard from this friend in 2 years. And he literally texted me during that meditation, hey, I heard your back's pretty messed up. Check out Neurokinetic therapy, the work of David Weinstock, NKT. So this was the first time I've heard about these therapies. And as soon as I started researching it, I was just like, it was automatically connecting all these dots for me with my background in kinesiology. And I knew that was my path and I couldn't wait to get a session. So I got a hold of him. He was in the Bay at the time and connected me with his top student in San Diego, Christina. And I went and saw her for my first session of NKT. And I remember walking in looking like Shakira stuck in a mid hip dance. Like it was embarrassing. My hips were over to the left, my upper body's to the right. And ironically, the body's so intelligent. That was representative of how out of alignment I was with my purpose at that time, going health coaching, training, getting people improving their lives through fitness. But yet I was going out on the weekend and living this other life and masking these heavy emotions. And so this was all coming clear. And as I lay down on the table, she started testing different muscle groups, and she tested my glutes and found that my glutes weren't firing. And I was like, what do you mean my glutes aren't firing? I have huge glutes, right? We laughed. She said, yep, all form, no function. And so she had me clench my jaw and then retested the glutes, and all of a sudden they were firing. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. So my body had just given us an answer that there was a neurological traffic jam in the jaw, overcompensating for the big guns, the glutes that help stabilize the hips through movement and the spine. So once we discovered that, she's putting on these rubber gloves, and I'm going like, "What are you doing?" She's like, "I know we just met, but I'm gonna have to go in your mouth." I said, "You're gonna what?" And so, with consent, of course, she starts releasing my jaw, and it was so achy and painful in there. Yet, as soon as we released it, I just felt this like increase in flow of energy, and all of a sudden now my glutes are firing again. And so we did this for a couple other compensation patterns that we found in my body. And I got off the table and I stood up straight and I gave her a huge hug. I was like, I'm like 90% better in compensation.
Wow.
I'm blown away. I had this huge epiphany. This is my path. I need to learn this. So I went on to study under David Weinstock, took all of his courses, and became certified as a neurokinetic pain relief specialist. And that changed the whole trajectory of my career and path. And it was such an honor, because then shortly after, I'm able to help others that are dealing with aches, pains, injuries, chronic stuff that had been limiting their, fun and weekend warriors, and even like mothers that have had C-sections, get to show them how these scars create neurological traffic jams, compensation patterns in the body that then lead to pain. And pain is simply the check engine light. It's our body's message signaling, hey, something needs to change, or we might be facing a major breakdown. So it's interesting how, as humans, we're usually pretty diligent about our vehicles, right? When the check engine light comes on, we're pretty good about, better go get this service so I don't have a major breakdown. However, when it comes to our bodies, we've just been conditioned to, resort to pills or quick fix or chase pleasure, or even go to the fridge and stuff it with something, or go on Netflix and escape from it. So all these coping strategies never address the actual issue and how to resolve it. And so that really is where a lot of my work began, going to the root source of where pain is coming from and how it's happening for us instead of to us. And because when we're in that like victim mode, like, why is this happening to me? It's like choosing to prolong the experience of suffering. And so this was profound for me, because I improved my relationship with pain as well as with my body, and began to understand these messages so much more, and was able to help a lot of other people on a huge capacity with these skills. So
fantastic. Yeah, man, lots of questions there. Love what you're doing. I remember my snowboarding and skiing days, which I lived in Colorado for a while, so I had that epic pass, and we'd go tear up, Vail or Beaver Creek or Breckenridge or whatever mountains. And I remember, there's a saying in that world that there are no friends on a powder day. When it's blizzard powder or when it's fresh, a few inches of powder, you just go and you meet your friends at the bottom of the mountain. So, and, I learned snowboarding relatively late. And I remember just learning snowboarding was such a painful experience, because it's a different motion. And I remember falling maybe 100 times the first day I tried to learn it. But I got coaching, and I had somebody helping me. So that was great. But I also played competitive soccer my whole life, most of my life. And that was a lot of falls, a lot of knee injuries, shoulders, because you're getting tripped up or you're tripping because, you're doing these maneuvers midair or whatnot. So I've got some of those. And I think I was telling you this a couple of days ago when we hung out last weekend. I'm going to pop by and come see you for my shoulder, at least in a few weeks. So let's touch on pain. And I know that back pain becomes more and more common as people go into midlife and beyond. I didn't realize how big of a problem this was until recently. And so lots of people complain about it. I remember now that my mother used to complain about it, when we were little kids, and she probably was in her 30s. So obviously it's prevalent. And so tell us about how the neurokinetic therapy actually works. You hinted at it a little bit, where there's different patterns in the body, but how is a practitioner able to sense it and what the experience might be for a person that's trying to come in and heal from pain?
Yeah, I can give a great example. One of my clients is the greatest athlete I know of on the planet, Trey Hardy. He is a world champion decathlete, and the guy's amazing, just like super humble. He's, world class athlete, incredible. And even him, I met him at this, Empowered Brotherhood workout that we had going on, and we got partnered up, not by chance. And he kind of had to sideline himself on some of the workout. And so I checked in with him and was like, hey, what's going on? He's telling me about his back pain. And so in one conversation, he was all in and began this inner peace process with me. And we did some sessions and found, even in one session, what was compensating for him, which is really common with low back pain. I see 80% of the people that I see for low back pain, when we begin testing muscle groups, I assess their posture, their movement, and it gives me clues. So for him, it was interesting because we would test his six pack, right? Superficial muscles, super strong, good signal. But as soon as I had tested his intrinsic core muscles, this is called your transverse abdominis. These are essentially your internal weight belt, right? That helps stabilize your spine. Mm-hmm. So those weren't getting a good signal at all. And so we had to figure out why. And of course, intuitively went straight to the jaw, had him clench his jaw. All of a sudden they're testing strong again. So his body was showing us that the compensation pattern was his jaw was overfiring and compensating for those intrinsic core muscles. And if those muscles aren't firing, like those should be firing milliseconds before we do any peripheral move to help stabilize the spine, decrease our risk of injury. And so this is why a lot of people might just go bend over and pick up their pencil and their back goes out, right? Mm-hmm. It's like there's these compensation patterns that have been going on for some time. And so clearing this up, you can get incredible results really fast. And and then I teach a really unique process and technique for once we figure out that's the case, then I teach him the bulletproof core technique. And this is a technique that helps you optimize the activation of those deep core muscles and combine that with an expansion breath technique I teach that allows you to increase internal abdominal pressure. And this actually helps stabilize your spine. And when your spine's stable, then you instantly become stronger in everything that you do. So it's a game changer going from like back pain to instantly stronger and able to stabilize your spine. So in one session, he was blown away. He kept showing up and we got to dive deeper into some of the other layers and a lot of the other reasons for pain that a lot of people don't look at or fully understand. And one of those is the metaphysics. And so this is the thoughts and the emotions that correspond with the signals that are showing up in our body. And so those were two key things: the metaphysics, the mental chatter that's going on, and the emotional aspect of pain. And so, I took him through this inner peace process that I offer, and he discovered some parts of him that needed some more love, support, and safety. And got through this process. He learned how to get to reparent that version of himself, integrate that, and before you know it, we're clearing, letting his body finally metabolize old, trapped, stuck emotions, and also getting to discover the subconscious beliefs that were created at that time, right? Mm-hmm. Which is really fascinating. These stories that we created at a younger age, going through challenges that we don't know how to process at the time. It's like we don't get to outrun those emotions, right? They either stay stuck as issues in our tissues and they'll keep getting poked, prodded, and triggered by, our loved ones or someone cutting you off on the street. But there is a very efficient and effective way of going through resolving those, allowing your body to metabolize that energy finally, and releasing. It's like going into your garden and pulling out the weeds of subconscious beliefs. And these might be like, oh, I'm not good enough, you know, I'm not worthy of love, or I have to do all this on my own. These type of beliefs that we pick up early on, sometimes they're passed down from our parents, or we go through a tough, challenging situation, create these beliefs, and then consciously we don't believe this, right? Like, oh, I'm worthy of all the greatest things in this life, right? But subconsciously, if these are still running, then they'll show up as upper limit problems in your everyday experience, right?
Yeah, I want to ask you about all of these in detail, Charles. I do want to flesh out a couple other questions about the neurokinetic therapy, which is, I assume we're talking about back pain, but it will work for pain in other joints, other areas of your body too?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So, once I teach the bulletproof core technique, once we find out that those intrinsic core muscles aren't firing properly, I teach a technique of combining expansion breath with optimal activation of those deep core muscles. And this makes you instantly stronger in everything that you do. So it's fascinating to go from like misaligned, in pain, to one session discovering these compensation patterns, clearing them, and then gaining this powerful technique that makes you feel like superhero strength.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Now, is it like a chiropractic modality where you have to keep coming back once a week or once every few weeks? Or is it you learn what you do with your practitioner and then you can practice some of this at home?
Yeah, great question. That's one thing I really love about this work is I'm not trying to get people to keep coming back. In fact, usually we can get to the root cause in 1 or 2 sessions. And then there's always layers to these things. So what I do is teach really powerful self-healing tools and practices so that they're empowered to remember that you are your own greatest healer.
Yeah.
And how to improve the relationship with your body and the vast intelligence that's in each and every cell, and the same power that's beating our hearts, and pumping our blood without us even having to think about it. And tapping into that intelligence, you can greatly improve your relationship with this technology and understand and get the messages louder and clearer instead of having to have the continuous breakdowns over and over.
Yeah, I love that. And I assumed, and correct me if I'm wrong, Charles, that the majority of at least pain in the muscles or pain in general is caused by a misuse of muscles or bad posture. And of course, I am not considering that there may be skeletal injuries to the bone, or there's soft tissue injuries where the cartilage is just worn out. How do you differentiate between like skeletal, cartilage, and or just muscle activation problems?
Yeah, you can even muscle test for that. It's really fascinating. You can this NKT works with both, all of those. Muscular works with tendons and ligaments. So and that's how we discover these compensation patterns, through muscle testing, getting answers from the body. It's really efficient and effective. And there's also that other element that a lot of people don't recognize when it comes to pain. It's like, yeah, you might be playing basketball and, you land and then your back hurts ever since, right? But why is that happening for you is a unique question, because yes, that happened and it's an event, but now, like, if someone's suffering back pain ever since then, so if you zoom out, there's a bigger picture going on, right? Like, what's going on in your life at that time that this needed to happen for you, right? And so oftentimes, there's issues, way we're thinking, right? So when it comes to low back pain, when we drop into the metaphysics and how our mental thoughts can manifest physical ailments and issues in our tissues, essentially, right? So if someone, oftentimes with low back pain, it might have to do with stress around not feeling supported, right? The back represents like our support in life. And it's interesting if it shows up on the right side or the left side more, that's giving us clues too. The right side, as we know in Eastern philosophy, is represents the masculine. That's like the doing aspect. And the left side represents the feminine, just the receptivity and just allowing ourselves to be. So when there's a nice balance between the two, there's less of these issues. But when we get imbalanced, that's why oftentimes we'll see right sides, tight side on the jaw. It's like even female entrepreneurs that are like stepping into the masculine and doing so much. This is a very common compensation pattern. And right side, tight side, and it's inhibiting these deep core muscles. And then the result is they're suffering from low back pain, check engine light. And so addressing the metaphysics is really fascinating because you begin to realize like how important it is to choose wisely the thoughts that we're identifying with. As when we're unconscious about it, it's just these old programs going of like, how am I going to pay the bills? I'm not feeling supported. I have all this stress and around money and finances and fear of that, fear of not having enough. And so these thought patterns can literally like create and be a cause for how this is happening for us, to show us some of these deeper issues. And then we can bring in some really powerful affirmations that help you embody a deeper truth, right? Wow, where actually there's evidence in your entire life that you've been fully supported this whole time. And there's this Mother Earth right beneath your feet that's providing us with more than enough abundance for everyone and every animal to thrive on the planet. So not to get too into that. But,
No, absolutely. I agree with what you're saying. So one last thing before we move on to inner peace and talking about thoughts and feelings and emotions and subconscious blocks is if somebody has issues in their tissues or they have pain in their body, they should be able to contact either yourself, Charles, or find an NKT coach near them. Would that be fair?
Yeah, and it's growing. There are practitioners all over now. One in California. There's only one other one in Austin, surprisingly, but that's growing. So you can, check out neurokinetictherapy.com and see where there's practitioners in your area. Or I've had people come all the way from Australia, flew here and got 3 sessions and were blown away by how much healing they could experience in such a short time. And these are people that have, been down, tried so many other things to heal their pain and haven't got the results that they wanted. So they almost want to give up or also consider surgery. And so this is a great way to definitely get a session of NKT before you decide, your last resort of having to go under the knife, or, there's just so many ways to heal naturally.
Love it. Thank you, Charles, for sharing all about NKT. Now, I'd like to move on to inner peace and all the thoughts and feelings that go with it. So people have, I believe it's 60,000 thoughts per day. Majority of those thoughts are an auto loop, auto repeat. They go unopposed, meaning you're not even conscious of what's going on, and it's programming you on a day-to-day basis. And so how do people at the first step 0 to me at least would be become aware of what you're thinking about all day, because we're completely unaware. How would people, what are your thoughts on the thoughts that are running in people's minds, and how do we become aware of these?
Yeah. I was pissed off. Actually, I was triggered when I heard that science, that data at first. I was like, wait, cool. We have, 60 to 70,000, 100,000 thoughts a day. But when I heard that the statistics show that like 96% of those thoughts are the same thoughts that we had the day before and the day before that and the day before that, I was like, what?
Wild.
Me, my soul loves novelty. So it was like this wake up call of like, I have the opportunity to choose better thoughts and create more novelty in my life. And that's literally how I infuse more vacation vibration into my daily experience, because once you even hit enter on booking a trip to some place that your soul calls you to, Thailand for the first time, or, go to Europe and just get to experience this new novelty, that lights you up. You know that feeling. It's this electricity that
Mm-hmm.
happens.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you go on the trip, it's like tuning into your higher self, right? You're, ultra like to dive into the cultures, and you're more open to like start conversations with strangers. And so it's kind of activates this higher essence of ourselves. So why not incorporate that experience that we know is possible into our daily lives more often? And that's what inspired me to create more vacation vibration. And there's a whole, a lot more to that. And, essentially that is what helped me go deeper into the power of thoughts, right? This helped me discover how we can actually be observer of all of our thoughts, right? Like I always kind of find it funny when people are like, yeah, when you meditate, you just have to empty your mind and stop your thoughts. I'm like, good luck with that.
Right.
Mind's made to think, right? And it's usually programmed to look for problems to try to solve. And so there's lots of problems up here, but when we get good at dropping from this space, calming our nervous system into intelligence of our body and our heart space, wow, what a difference. It can literally sound like this. It's like, oh my gosh, I got to pay these bills and I need this to work out, and all this control and like problems. And you're like, well, what's in it for me with this deal, right? To a deep breath, exhaling, taking a little 12-inch elevator ride into your heart space and realizing, oh, wow, look at everything I have to give, right? A totally different operating system. And so when you live here more and combine this with the mind and heart coherence, and they've studied this with some incredible science and heart coherence and the power of that, then the mind can become this beautiful instrument of the heart, the intelligence of your body, your intuition, and your gut. So you can just enjoy more vacation vibration, throughout your day. And it's here to relax and come to a state of, I call it the seat of consciousness, right? So a great way to think about this is if you're a surfer, you're out past the breaker on a beautiful day out surfing, and you duck dove through all these waves to get to this space where you're just beyond where the waves break, and you get to just sit on your board and enjoy the beauty of everything. And you can literally watch as these waves go by, right? And you can choose which ones you want to wait for that right wave to drop in on and ride it. And that's the difference between, choosing to identify with negative thoughts, right? Those are like dropping in on waves that we just get pummeled. And then it has this emotional experience in our body that doesn't feel good. And then it's like more negative thoughts come, right? More waves. You're just getting pounded on the head by all these negative waves / thoughts. So instead, why not practice just simply being the observer of these thoughts? Like, who is thinking the thought, right? And the thoughts aren't you. They're just energy, like waves going by. And if you're the type that's trying to, stop thoughts, I don't want to think that. It's like trying to sit on the shore and stop a wave from coming, right? Good luck with that. And so instead, it's just simply observing it and acknowledging, oh, there's a thought. Oh, that's an interesting negative thought that I used to identify with. I see you. And let them just go by until you choose better thoughts that feel better in your system. So I can give you a very practical example of this, because Charles 1.0, boy, I had a subconscious pattern of every time I look in the mirror in the morning, I was instantly looking for flaws. Maybe some people can relate. It's like, oh, wow, like getting another wrinkle here. Like, wow, there's a gray hair. I was just like, my hair's messed up here. Instead of just enjoying, looking into my eyes, this program would come on and it was like automatically dropping in on these negative waves and just getting pummeled because it doesn't feel good in my body. And if I keep riding those waves, it's like, oh man, I'm getting gray hairs. Like, I'm getting old, man, I'm probably going to break down soon. And if you identify with those thoughts, that's literally shaping your reality. So this is one of the most profound, biohacks or, reality shifts for people. And especially when it comes to anti-aging, right? So instead, I recognized that and got to laugh at this old program that was like installed in my brain to look for the flaws. Instead, it was like upgrading that, pulling that weed out of the garden. And now it's like, oh, yeah, there's a gray hair. Cool. Perhaps it's a sign of sophistication. Sean Connery, right? So I can enjoy some salt and pepper, right? Mm-hmm. And it doesn't have to mean all this, oh my gosh, I'm getting old, my body's going to fall apart, all these things. Instead, I can enjoy that I'm aging gracefully and it looks good. And so those are waves that I'm choosing to drop in on that feel much better. It's like you're getting barreled and you're at one with nature, and it creates this feel good emotion in your body. So when you get good at this practice, you can really get to witness your thoughts more and not get caught up in the negative thought spirals as much, and always choose to come back to the seat of consciousness. And this is a lot of the work that I do with my clients is helping them get good at this practice. So you can just choose better feeling thoughts, and this shifts your entire reality.
Yeah. Shifts your life over a long enough period of time, even a short enough period of time. Yep. I noticed that in my meditations, Charles, when I'm sitting in there, I am now, for the first time in many years of attempting to meditate, giving up, Now I've become good at my practice. And so now I notice thoughts come up, and I often catch these thoughts and I go, is that a future thought or a past thought? And every time it's a future thought, I'm like, I give myself a virtual pat on the back. I'm like, good job. You're not stuck in the past. That's good. And then I see, is it a thought that's, negative, or is it positive? So both of those I grade myself on. And every time there's a positive future thought, I'm like, okay, or a present thought, even better. Then I pat myself on the back. And there's a past thought relating to the past. I'm like, okay, be on guard for that. Don't allow that to come back into your brain. And so just little things of pruning some of the thoughts help. And of course, now that you brought up, what an excellent example. I didn't even do this one of looking in the mirror and being reaffirming or positive. I'm going to stick something on my mirror so to remind myself to be positive and be kind. That's a great loop breaker. Once you break that loop a few times, you can change it. It's not going to be the same ever again. So love some of those things. I'm in the same process, and I'm working through some of these thoughts. And I noticed that in the past couple of years, I've changed so much, man, in a positive way. And I love the direction of where my life is going. And sometimes it's tumultuous because you're going through the river, right? You're crossing the river of change, and it feels unsteady because you don't know where you're actually going. And it's not the same old you that was so grounded in these beliefs and subconscious patterns that felt like home. So anyway, it's a great place to be, and thanks for sharing that. So let's now talk about how thoughts are related to feelings. And for what I understand, when you have a thought in your brain, it activates neural networks and circuits that release chemicals that travel in your body and then activate the feeling centers in your body. So now you're caught in these loops of thoughts and feelings, and the feeling then creates more thoughts in the brain. So now it's just an avalanche. I think you just talked about this. Is an avalanche of thoughts and feelings, and it could go positively, or for most people, unfortunately, it goes negatively. So what is the relation in your mind, and how do we better address our emotions moving forward?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, for a long time, I was practicing, I was like Captain Positivity. I would literally just choose the best case scenario. I was like, there's always a flip side to this coin, whatever's happening, right? And so I would always just choose the better thoughts. And that helped me to a great degree. And, just like what we talked about, I got good at observing thoughts, noticing which ones I was identifying with, noticing old patterns, because those create an experience in your body. Now, that helped me reach about, a certain level of joy, right? But I kind of maxed out there because I wasn't willing to go deeper in the depths of some heavy emotions, right? That I was just trying to avoid. I just didn't like going into grief. I didn't like spending much time in depression and anxiety and these things. I developed strategies to avoid those. And I think we're all pretty good at this. And so that over time became like big time issues in my tissues. I was feeling like tight. I was having the same like neck recurring injury. And so it was really frustrating because this is before I knew about NKT, and I would go to different practitioners, physical therapists, massage therapy, chiropractor, all the things I could find, but nothing really helped long term or resolved it until it's always the last place you look, right? I finally addressed the emotional component, right? And so this is coming back to, even early on, if we go through experiences and we don't know how to process the emotions, then we still have the opportunity to do that, to clear that energy and understand how it's happening for us. And so that is a game changer, having some tools to process emotions, so that in doing that, it all shifted for me when I was like, instead of trying to feel better all the time and like maxing out on my joy, pleasure, just kind of hitting a ceiling on that, because I had a million biohacks to feeling better in the moment, breath work and, cold plunge and all these things. But there were some things that I was unaddressed, that I wasn't addressing. And so I gave myself permission to, instead of trying to feel better, just allowing myself to feel more. It was interesting in doing that because it allowed me to go to the depths of some of these heavier emotions, including anxiety. And that was one that I was avoiding for a long time. And I had this fear of people seeing me like freaking out. So I was really good at masking it. I could just have this energy of anxiety going internally, but I didn't let anyone see that, right? Mm-hmm. So it was this unresolved energy. And so when I really dove into it, I tried every strategy possible to avoid it. Didn't work. So I was finally like, you know what? I'm going to invite this in. I'm going to invite anxiety in for tea. It's essentially like anxiety, right? And in doing that, I felt into these uncomfortable feelings, and I noticed the mind freaking out. It was like observing my body, where it was showing up in my heart space, my solar plexus. And it was like, no, hurry, go to the fridge, stuff it. Like, just grab your phone and call a friend, or just get on Instagram and find some dopamine, and scroll. Right. And I just observed those, said, thanks for the Band-Aids, mind. I'm going to stay with this and see what's here. So I went deeper into the feelings of anxiety, even though they're very uncomfortable. The fascinating thing was it began to pass, and it's all temporary. And so going into it is the way through, instead of keeping it stuck in our issues as tissues. That which we resist just persists. But when you're able to feel it, then you can heal it. And so fascinating. I mean, imagine I gained so many lessons and blessings from just sitting with anxiety. It was literally like an old friend that had been knocking at the door, and I just hadn't answered it. Mm-hmm. He had an important message for me. If we break it down, anxiety has a charge to that word based on our past experiences, right? So it can feel like nails on a chalkboard to our nervous system, even just that word. So if we just call the A word what it is, it's energy. It's a lot of energy moving through our system, right? And energy is information. So there's some important information that this is trying to share with me. And so I finally let that in, sat with it, and recognized some really important messages, some golden nuggets. It was like staring my biggest fear right in the face. And my biggest fear, above all these little like fears of rejection or fear of looking stupid and embarrassment, or, fear of it not being perfect, those were all minor level fears compared to my superseding fear, which I got to face sitting with anxiety, which is deathbed regrets. Recognizing how temporary these organic human bodies are, that this is all temporary. And so before I die, there are some really important ideas I have, some messages on my heart, some gifts that I want to share with the world, with humanity, with those that need it, that can really help them on their life, on their path. And if I were to come to the end of my life and I was too afraid to share those because I gave in to rejection, fear of, being seen and all these silly underlying fears, then I would be stuck with deathbed regrets and take all those amazing gifts to the grave. This happens way too often. So seeing that, confronting myself with death actually lit a fire. It was like a healthy fear that I recognized. It was like inspired me to begin pulling out this list of amazing ideas and programs that I wanted to create that were collecting cobwebs at the time because I was choosing to overconsume instead, because that's what we've been taught, right? So, every time I was overconsuming and not stepping into my power as an epic creator in this life, that anxiety was coming up, right? So how fascinating is this? Like, this huge aha moment and recognition that it was like a friend of mine. And I was so thankful for this message because it changed everything for me.
Yeah.
It inspired me to share more and create, empowered brotherhood, all these like different creations that I had sitting on hold that I was just choosing for the short-term gratification of like, let's just go out for another drink or, go to a party or social experiences instead of stepping into my creator consciousness. And so that inspired me. And it also shifted my entire relationship with anxiety. I don't fear it anymore. I've felt through the depths of that and I recognize how it's happening for me. So now I just pay attention to the feathers. Like if it comes up at all, it's not the same experience that I used to have. It's more of like a reminder. Say, hey, you've been over consuming a bit here, might want to get back to work on that. That important gift that you want to share before your life is over in this round. Right?
Yeah.
So, game changer.
Yeah. Fantastic, Charles. Thank you for sharing experience with anxiety and as it relates to emotions that are unprocessed sitting in there. I had a question. So obviously we are at some level aware of these emotional wounds that we might have. You mentioned anxiety. A lot of people have fear of rejection or fear of not being loved or not being enough, right? Those come up a lot. So there's your core understanding that you have some of these beliefs or some of these emotions that are unprocessed and you're ignoring them. And there might also be subconscious patterns that you're not even aware of. So is there anything truth to that? Meaning there's a subconscious belief pattern and a feeling and emotion that you haven't even processed, you're not aware of. So try as you might, sit as you might in silence, it's not going to come up.
Yeah. Anytime that you have a heart's desire, right? Like a goal, okay, this year I'm going to make this much money by helping this many people and then get to go to the Maldives and stay in one of those hotels underwater, right? So that is a heart's desire, right? And anytime that we are diverting from that, it's like, I could work on this thing that's going to help me move towards that desire, towards experiencing that. Then you have steps towards that. But when we divert from that, which happens a lot, right? It's like, well, I could work on this, but there's this dinner party and all these things going on. And so every time we choose that, it's like there's a subconscious belief going on at the root of that. Anytime your actions aren't in alignment with your heart's desires, there's always a subconscious belief running that's creating this perpetual self-sabotage. Right. And it can be very frustrating. I think a lot of people experience this, especially when you've done some level of healing and yet something comes up again. You're like, I thought I've healed that already. Like, I can't believe this is coming up again. It can bring even more frustration. And so then it's time to go into even the frustration. And that's what's so amazing about the inner peace process that I offer is it's how to connect the dots as to those emotions, that energy in motion that became stuck at some point. Your body's so intelligent, it literally knows what gets to be healed in priority. Right? Like what wants to be released, the energy that's no longer in resonance with your higher self and your system, that wants to be released and metabolized so that you can come back into your natural state of homeostasis, joy, pleasure, vacation, vibration. And So it's so worth it every time to go into these emotions and discover how it's happening for us. And the inner peace process is the easiest, most profound way that I've found to do that and release those subconscious beliefs. You recognize where they came from, and then you can bring in deeper truths and embody that. And through this process, I guide people through it so they get an experiential learning and they get to witness how fast you can metabolize this trapped energy. And this is fascinating for staying young, right? And prolonging your life, because that stuck energy is not in resonance with your system. So it's going to get poked and prodded and triggered, right? So when you see a lot of the same triggers, the people that know how to push your buttons and make you angry or upset or sad, those are your greatest teachers. And they're usually our loved ones, right? And even our so-called enemies, right? They are some of our greatest teachers because they're able to show us these blind spots of something that's still unresolved within ourselves that now we have the opportunity to resolve. So having a tool and a process like this step by step is so empowering, because anytime you get triggered, you're like, oh man, I can't believe that happened. This is so frustrating. You can either choose the mind's band-aids, right? And, stuff it, escape from it, get the short-term fix, just seeking pleasure, but that keeps it stuck. It doesn't resolve it. Or now you have a tool that you can go through step by step to resolving it from the source, allowing your body to metabolize that emotion finally, and seeing the lessons and blessings in it and pulling those subconscious beliefs that no longer serve you. This frees up so much energy. It's like experiencing the same energy that creates planets flowing to and through you again. And you're like, whoa, thank God I released that freaking rock that had been stuck in my system for so long. And then, you get good at this. It becomes like a level of curiosity. You put on the lens of, oh, I just got triggered. Like this person made me upset. This is interesting. I get to go inward and see how this is happening for me and resolve it for myself. And what's really powerful is anyone out there that wants to have kids or is a parent, this is my greatest inspiration. My two daughters, I see them, and every time that I don't choose the short-term gratification fix strategies of the mind, and I decide to take it through this inner peace process and resolve it from the source, I literally am releasing old generational wounds, old negative programs that have been passed down for generations, right? Causing suffering. And this is one less wound, generational wound and negative programs that my kids have to carry forth.
Love it. So let me interject you for a second. This comes up a lot, at least in Austin, generational wounds. And so I want to double click into that for people that might not be aware. And let me phrase it and then correct me if I'm wrong. Is a generational wound something that gets passed on from generation to generation, but it's either a subconscious belief that gets installed because of what your parents say or what they do, and now therefore it's part of your psyche. You're following it all the way through and instilling it in your children too. Is that what it is?
Yep. Yeah, okay. Exactly. So it's like, I can give you an example, from my own personal journey. At age 4, my mom knelt down and shared with me that our parents were getting a divorce and that she had to leave, and that I didn't know when I was going to see her again. So for a 4-year-old, this was like the worst news ever and a lot to process. And I didn't understand. So there was confusion, there was anger, there was sadness. And so the story that I created as a 4-year-old was that, wow, love has to equal pain, because the woman I love the most is leaving and it's so painful. And like, I'm not worthy of love, right? Or I can't keep the ones that I love around. So these sound like ridiculous stories, but to a 4-year-old, that's what feels like the truth when you're going through something like that. So that's literally how these, abandonment wound, this is the example of so many people deal with this generational wound that's passed down. And so that was my first experience of it. And then as I go through my life, I'm like, I'm tough. All my friends, we can't show tears, like that's for wusses, and like we got to be strong and can't show weakness, all these silly beliefs that we pick up, right? So that just repressed all the emotions that I didn't feel then, and kept this loop, this subconscious belief running. How did that show up in my life? College sweetheart, fall in love, most amazing woman I had met to that time period. And after a year in our relationship, circumstantially, she had to leave and move to Portland while I was still in Washington State. She decided we didn't want to do the long distance thing, so we broke up. And that was this heartbreak again, right? And then the next girlfriend that I fell in love with years later, amazing, incredible, newfound love and like the highest highs. And then what happened? She left me, right? And so this pattern finally helped me realize, whoa, I'm the common denominator here. I get to take responsibility for my actions that actually helped create that. Because what's happening behind the scenes is that I was subconsciously pushing them away by immature actions, just doing stupid stuff and like needing my space. So I push them away and we break up, and I'm left with that heartbreak again that I hadn't processed from my mom leaving when I was 4. And so that's how I developed this inner peace process, was combining all these parts and pieces and reparenting that I had experienced from great teachers, and got to implement them in this really simple system that allows me to finally recognize that, that's how I can take ownership of why that happened. And that my mind, the ego, wants to always take us back to what's familiar, even if it's super painful. Heartbreak, right? Keeps reoccurring because that's where the story was implanted, that I'm not worthy of love, or that I can't keep my loved one around. So until I resolve that, how am I to call in my queen, right? That I want to start a family with. And so this was some of my deepest work to heal the abandonment wound. And it was such a game changer by doing that, because I finally got to revisit my 4-year-old and get to provide him with the love, support, and safety that he didn't feel like he had then. And when I first checked on him, did this work, he was like pissed off. He didn't want anything to do with me. He was like, "What are you doing here?" And so this is all in a meditative state, but I just kept showing up for him. I was like, "I'm here to support you. I know I wasn't there then, and but now I'm here and I want to show you everything that we've created since then." And over time, he's lightening up. We get to hug it out, share some tears. And then when I check on him, he's excited to show me, what he was creating at our old art table back at that house. And that was inspiring me to create more in my life now, and integrating that, providing that love, safety, and support to the parts of me that needed it most, and releasing that old story. Like, that's not true. I don't have to just lose my lovers, right? Love doesn't have to always equal pain. I don't have to get abandoned all the time. And so resolving that for myself, it wasn't long after, called in my queen.
Nice.
And
fantastic, man.
I have like the most incredible relationship I've ever had, without any skeletons in the closet, without any secrets to hide. I get to fully be me and don't have this worry of like, oh my gosh, she's going to leave me. And so that's the power that's available by doing this inner work, literally, releasing generational wounds like the abandonment wound, the mother wound, the father wound. These are all classic stories that are happening for us. And there's ways to move through it and rewrite your story.
Well, great. Thank you for sharing, Charles. We're coming up on time, so I want to be respectful. And where can people get the inner peace process? Where do they go?
Yeah, so that's the deep dive work with me, one-on-one work, and I do group training. So I'll be opening up another group training for that soon. So keep an eye out for that. There's more information on it at charlesclay.coach. That's my website. And there's even if you go all the way to the bottom on charlesclay.coach, you can subscribe to my newsletter and you'll receive a free gift. And this is an alignment activation, a guided alignment activation. It used to be an hour long. I've condensed it down to like 22 minutes. And as a father, I have a 2-minute version of it too. It helps you fill your cup and clear energy that's stagnant, that might not even be yours. So it's amazing. Anytime you're feeling off or out of alignment, you use this alignment activation series of movement, breath work, and visualization to help you fill up on your full sovereign chi, I call it. And that's like filling up with your own life force energy. So there's no room for anything else. And from there, it's easy to take inspired action from your heart. And it's really exciting. This practice has helped a lot of people share more of their gifts, move out of misalignments. So you can use it as a good morning ritual. Highly recommend it. Just go to charlesclay.coach, receive that gift, try it out. Let me know how it goes. And there's also more on the inner peace process there as well.
Fantastic, Charles. Thank you so much for coming on the Anti-Aging Hacks show, man. Really appreciate you.
Absolutely, brother.